All right, I'm going to read the intro that this translation gives, because it was decent. And despite of Satan, Job sinned not, nor for all these sufferings and temptations could Satan prevail with him, so far to forget himself towards God as to utter a misbelieving word against him. Yes, that is in this section, actually. We're reading 1, 2, and 3. The introduction from this translation, from this Bible, says, considered both a theological and literary masterpiece, the book of Job is an honest portrayal of God allowing a good man to suffer. The test of Job's faith, allowed by God in response to a challenge from Satan, revealed God's loving sovereignty and the supremacy of divine wisdom over human wisdom, personified by Job's friends, which really, really is. And it's almost painful to read when it comes to his friends. Believing that God is good despite the apparent evidence to the contrary, Job rested in faith alone. In the depths of agony, he could still proclaim, I know that my Redeemer lives. In the end, God silenced all discussion with the truth that he alone is wise, yet he vindicated Job's trust in him, providing that genuine faith cannot be destroyed. The unknown author was probably an Israelite, writing sometime between 1500 and 500 BC. And there is... Never mind. We'll come back to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Kat said, fun fact, in ancient cultures and some today still, royals would wear these snakes, good God, as live jewelry. They're actually called royal ball pythons because of it. That is a fact. Heidi, I remember Heidi. Heidi says, shalom. Happy Sunday. First day of the week. I can relate to Job. Here's the thing, Heidi. I like you a lot, and I'm glad you're here. But I have a personal vendetta against the concept of Sunday being the first day of the week. I get why. I get it. Especially from a religious standpoint. I get it. But it just isn't in practice. In practice, Monday is the first day of the week. So for all my calendars, when it asks me, what is the first day of the week? It is Monday. Monday starts the week, baby girl. The week ends on Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm a heretic. We already know this. I didn't know that, Cat. Thanks, Snake Queen. Hey, Mikkel. All right, chapter 1, verse 1. Job's character and wealth. Just fun fact reminder, in case you forgot, none of these scriptures, none of them at all, 0% of them, had chapters or titles. So just keeping that in mind. These are fun things that translations do that aren't even in unison. So depending on what Bible you have, the titles will be different. The verses, for the most part, are the same. The chapters are, for the most part, the same. But the titles are fun things that whoever produces the Bible gets to decide all by themselves. So for this one, it's Job's character and wealth, which is a valid title. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. The land of Uz, or Uz, the location, like many locations in the ancient Near East, don't know, not really. But they say that it is either near Edom, and the guess from that is pulled from Genesis 36, and a couple other verses, but I believe primarily Genesis 36. In the south of Aram, or in the north of Aram. So very generalized location, which is, we've learned already just in Genesis, that is very common. That man was blameless and upright. This is the first presentation of who Job is. This is the setting of the stage. If we think of it like a movie, it's called character development. So it's no different in literature, and it's no different in the Bible, because a lot of the time they're just stories. And not to say they're not real or anything, but they're still stories. We're being told a story. So this is the beginning of the character development of Job, and it's very, very important. It's deeply important because of the principle that later comes. So this is our first example of Job was a blameless man. He was upright. This is us presenting him as the ideal human. He was the best of the best, a man of integrity who loved and was devoted to God. The Hebrew term for upright is, Ghost can cut me off, but I think it's yeshar or yesher. It's in reference to something that is straight or level, literally. So in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, Isaiah 26 and Jeremiah 31, the same term is used to express something that is level. It is straight. So then it makes sense to describe a human that way as well, in a non-literal sense, but I guess also in the literal sense if you think about it. It indicates honesty and righteousness, known because the same term is used in Psalms and Proverbs to express those things. To be upright, to be yeshar, is to be obedient to God, to have your head on straight. And the same term is used in other contexts for a similar or the same purpose. Then it said, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Describes a reverent attitude of respect, obedience, and trust towards God. The indicators before make that relatively clear, so they're just driving it home. One who feared God. This is, I think we've had some arguments in the past about this concept of like fearing God. Well, we shouldn't be afraid of God. Well, maybe you should, but even if not, a lot of the times when it's expressed in the Old Testament is not like scary fear. It's the reverence. It's a deep respect and reverence of something that is so mighty or great. It's closely associated with the term wisdom in the Old Testament, which again we also know because in the poetic books the same term is often used in that context. So if we pull out this term or this descriptive term, fear God, and we just talk about that alone on its own with no context, you could have arguments. But if you pull it from somewhere like Proverbs or from Psalm, in context, the way it is, it's not a scary thing. It's like a deep reverence. It's a love. It's a respect. It's not like a, ooh, spooky ghost in the sky. Ruth. Nothing so absolutely governs the multitude as superstition. What is that from? Spinoza? I have something to look at later. Verse 2. Oh, we've made it so far already. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. This is interesting and important because of the numbers. So from other places, later in Job, there is an example of what a family is. The ideal family, if you will. And this is the ratio that is given. So it's setting up for that later. It's out of chapter 42 later. The number 7, obviously, even just going through Genesis and never having read anything else, we already have kind of a sense that the number 7 is significant in some sense. Normally it's expressed as it's the expression of completeness or being whole. And that was not just in the Hebrew world, that was outside of the Hebrew world, elsewhere as well. There was also a prominent number, and that would be 3. And so he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The same ratio then will apply in 1 second to the sheep and the camel. Whether this is literal, you could argue for days. When you get into 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, is it likely he had exactly these numbers of everything? Probably not. If he was real at all, if this was a literal story at all, is it likely he had that exact number? Probably not. So then it's a matter of drawing the line. Well, where is the line? What is literal? What is not? What is embellishment? What is not? What is just leveling things out so the story is easier to tell because they were passed down verbally for so long? Well, 7,000, 3,000, 500, and 500 is pretty easy to remember versus what the reality probably was were this literal. But he had 7 sons, 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, just like Cat wants. 500 female donkeys. And very many servants. The moral of the section is he's wealthy. That's what really matters from the section, in my opinion. Unless you're super into numerology, then whatever, I support it. I'm just not about it. It's not my jam. But this is an expression of the man is very well off. So we're still developing Job as a character. He's upright. He's blameless. He loves God. He fears God. Okay, good. He's a moral and holy man. Got it. What's next? He's got a bunch of sheep, he's got a bunch of camel, he's got oxen, he's got female donkeys, and many servants. Okay, so not only is he blameless, good, God-fearing man, we get it, he's moral. Also, he's extremely wealthy. He has a beautiful life for this time period and where he was. He had it as good as you could possibly have it. He had no complaints about life. He had it made. So this man was the greatest of all the people of the East, it says, finishing in verse 3. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings, according to the number of them. So for how many there were, that's what he would offer. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually, doing the burnt offerings. So Job, being the pious man that he was obviously troubled about his children and the potential of their holiness being smudged, losing it, them cursing God in their hearts. He was concerned about this. So burnt offerings were a part of Israel prior to law and also after law. So Exodus 29, Leviticus 1, part of the law, but also prior to, being from Genesis 8, Genesis 22, and Exodus 10, just as a side note. So these things were custom before as well as after the law. So before it became a part of the law, because it was included in the law, and then after, obviously, when it became included as a part of the written law, then these things became something you had to do. But it's a good example that they were happening prior to that. And curse God in their hearts. So he's concerned about the kids. I wanted to read this real quick, because this was interesting. It says, in ancient Israelite thought, the heart was considered the center of a person's character and primarily represented their cognitive abilities. I thought that was interestingly worded. The people of Israel were commanded to love Yahweh with all their hearts, from Deuteronomy 6 and Psalm 9. But I just thought that was interesting. The center of a person's character and primarily represented their cognitive abilities, which makes sense too, if you think about it, aggregated across other texts in the Old Testament. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything important. I see camels and donkeys, so I'm going to go with no. We're probably good. The church began when the first commandment in the garden was given. Oh, I don't know about that, but now I feel like I missed something. If it's important, I'll come back. Satan allowed to test Job. So now we have the character developed. We know who Job is. We know he's very wealthy. We know he has a family who he loves. We know his family is even perfect, because he has the 7-3 ratio that is then described later in Job as the ideal family. Perfect family, perfect man, perfect life. Character officially developed. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And this is where things get weird, and this is where I'm going to really try to not go down a rabbit hole, because it's something that aggravates me greatly on a personal level. The Hebrew phrase that was used for the sons of God, it's B'nai Elohim, which is the rabbit hole I'm not going to go down, but here is meant to be rendered as sons of God, which it is, which is good, in reference to spiritual beings who, in this scenario, are a part of God's council, the divine council, which I don't remember why, but we were talking about it recently. Like really recently, like last week at some point. For this reason, some translators render the phrase B'nai Elohim here and elsewhere as angels. And without going down the rabbit hole, especially if you've done any bit of Enoch with us, but if you were here for Genesis, we've seen the sons of God be used in a different context. Same term, very different context, wildly different context, almost antithetical in meaning. So just for our purposes here, and for me to shut up and not dive into the depths of this out of pure personal frustration, is the sons of God here are a part of God's counsel. So these are, which is why some translations will render it angel and not sons of God, because sons of God becomes confusing for anybody who has read the Bible deeply. They get very confused and frustrated about it. So here we're talking about angels, divine counsel. These are the way I used to preach this was like, you imagine God at a conference room table, and he's surrounded by his co-workers, all angels, and then Satan walks into the conference room and sits at the other side of the table. So you have God, you have this heavenly council, and then you have Satan sitting across from the table here in one moment. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down it, just frolicking around." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" A couple things here. In other places, when Satan is talking, going to and fro, from walking up and down on it, in other places, the same terms in Hebrew are applied to somebody looking for something. So like searching for something, not just wandering around. The way that it's described in English kind of just seems like he's wandering around, like aimless, not really doing anything. In other places, it's used very specifically for somebody who is in search of something, which makes a lot more sense contextually. If this said, "I've been in search of something, walking up and down the earth," and then the Lord said, "Well, have you considered my servant Job?" The insinuation is then like Satan was looking for somebody to mess with, essentially, in a very simple way. The image of Satan, the figure wandering around the earth looking for someone to accuse, which is what Satan does, because Satan is not the pitchfork and the devil, and like that's all makes no sense and also isn't true. It's the accuser. So if he's wandering in search of someone to accuse of something, and then this is what the entire story ends up being about. Okay, I'll come back to that. Good angels, bad angels. Good ben Elohim, bad Elohim. Priceless Naga wisdom. Good thing we're guided by ancient Naga. The first day of the week, oh no. The first day of the week, this refers to Sunday, the day after the Jewish Sabbath. It is significant as the day of Jesus' resurrection, which is why Christians traditionally worship on Sunday. Right, I get the religious context. I just mean as like a working man in that context. I don't like it. I don't like it. It just frustrates me. Chanson, if you see this, I brought you up on the stage in Discord. You just have to approve. Oh, cool. I don't think I've met that person. I also did it just in case.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Isn't Chanson one of your Instagram followers?
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
We verified him.
Did we? Then I just need to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
Has he been around, like, talking? I haven't seen him. He's gone.
No, but he's definitely verified.
Okay. Then probably. I just probably don't recognize the name if he hasn't been around a lot. By the way, I did go to church this Sunday. Well, that's good. That's always a positive thing. Yes, because we all are on the Roman calendar now. Under Rome. Mikkel, what about the ancient serpent in Eden? This ought to be good. I assume that's going to be a good one. Okay, so Satan's wandering around. God's like, well, have you thought of Jacob? I'm sorry, not Jacob, Job. He is perfect. He's not like any other, blameless, upright man. He fears me and he turns away from evil. What about him? Satan answers the Lord and says, did Job fear God for no reason? Which is it's an accusation in and of itself. Does Job fear God for no reason? He's essentially saying, Job has every reason to fear you. And again, fear is not scary fear. Fear is respect. Fear is respect. So does Job not respect you for a good reason? Do you not give him everything? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. So he's doing what he does, and here comes the accusation. The question of the source of why Job is the way he is what is now at stake. It's what's being accused. Is it because he's blessed? Is it because he does what he's supposed to do? Is it because of his spiritual foundation, or is it because of something else? So Satan is trying to now accuse Job. that the fearing of God is simply because of what he has. Because of all that God does for him, that is why Job does what he does. And so now they have to prove that he's wrong. He will curse you to your face. I wanted to read this. It says here in Job 1:5, 2:5, and 2:9, because it'll be the same phrase. The Hebrew text actually uses the word for bless. And this gets kind of confusing. So bear with me. The word is barak, not curse. We in English get he will curse you to your face. The Hebrew term is bless. And actually, let me pull this up. Stretch out your hand and touch your Here you go. So in Strong's, if you wanted to look at it, it's 1288. But in Hebrew, curse would say bless. The wording is, it's using a term that is the opposite of its actual meaning. The use avoids having a biblical text explicitly say curse God in Hebrew, which is legitimate if you look into it. And it's not the only time something like this happens. But the word that is the opposite gets used so that they literally avoid putting curse God explicitly in the Bible. The dual usage of barak, however, adds a layer of irony to the exchange, since in verse 21 later, Job actually does bless God. He gives a blessing to Yahweh after he does his spiel that becomes kind of a trope later. Even though he had lost all of his wealth, he blesses God later, using the same term here that is now being translated in English as curse. Confusing, but it's just something to be aware of if you care. That in the Hebrew, that would say,
Hey, Joe,
yes.
could you put the YouTube back up? It's on Discord.
Thank you, yes. 12. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So the first time now that he's going out on his own. It's the one that people get really upset about, where God is seemingly giving Satan free reign to do whatever he wants. Almost worse, it's like permission. And this starts a lot of theological arguments. So if we want to go into any of it, we can. But the Lord gives Satan permission in the story. Behold, all that he has is in your hands. You can do anything you want, only do not stretch your hand out to him. Do not physically hurt him, which doesn't last. All that he has, though, God is... No, we'll come back to that. All right, so Satan takes Job's property and children. The first issue, all that he has is in your hands, do not hurt him. Do not hurt him. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabians fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So one of these guys got away to be able to go tell Job what happened. While he was yet speaking, there came another servant and said, the fire of God fell. This is often translated, this is often interpreted, not translated. It's often interpreted as lightning. The fire fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So we get another servant who made it through just so long as he could tell Job that everybody else died. While he was yet speaking, there came another servant who said, the Chaldeans formed three groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down their servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Same deal, different event, different group of people, all under Job's family, all under Job's care, all of Job's stuff, living stuff. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And guess what? I alone have escaped to tell you. And that is the last one. So one person from each group of what Job loves, the people and animals that Job loves, one person comes one by one to let him know everybody is dead. Then Job arose and tore his robes and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. We've talked about it 1,000 times, but in case you don't know, very, very common way of expressing grieving way of grieving in the ancient Near East. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And that is what I was referring to a minute ago with the Hebrew term that we use for curse in verse 11 is actually the same term used here for bless. They just don't want to put curse next to Yahweh in the Bible, which is very interesting. But same term. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So character development wise, we have the beautiful, wonderful Job. All good. Life is wonderful. Satan is wandering around looking for somebody to accuse for some weird reason that goes very deep theologically, so we don't have to talk about it unless somebody wants to. For some weird reason, God ends up having a meeting with Satan and with the angelic council, to be polite about it, and God gives Satan permission to essentially destroy Job's life. He's just not allowed to hurt him. You can't physically do anything to Job. You can do anything else, though. And so this is where we sit. And in doing all of that, Job is still staying true to his faith. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He blesses Yahweh. After all of this happens, he blesses Yahweh. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with any wrongdoing. He's standing by the way that God described him to be, which was steadfast in his faith. Satan is the first troll.